after several years of doing things virtually, there's nothing better than seeing all your smiling faces and being able to interact with real-life human beings again. We are so grateful for your presence at this beautiful event that each year brings together people of different backgrounds, different faiths, and different political beliefs. And I personally believe more events like this are needed during these divisive times. So thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate you very much. Now I'd like to recognize some of our elected officials, and if I'm leaving anyone out, please let me know. But I know that Tax Assessor Dr. Bruce Elfand is here. Bruce, if you'd like to wave. Travis County Commissioner Bridget Shea. I know I saw Bridget earlier. There she is. District Judge Jan Soifert is here. Jan. And Travis County Sheriff Sally Hernandez is here this evening. And the elected officials I'm leaving out. Okay, we did it. We got it right. Now for our opening prayer, I would like to welcome Father Charles Coleman with the St. Austin Catholic Parish. Father Coleman.
Good evening. Let us take a second to place ourselves in the presence of the transcendent. Loving God, who have made us, who call us to live together on this one beautiful planet, help us open our minds and our hearts to greater understanding. We might live truly as your children, now and forever. Let us all say, Amen. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Father Coleman. And now I'd like to bring Dr. Gunnar Aslan, who's the founding board member of the Dialogue Institute, and help make tonight possible and spearheaded this event. Come on up.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. I'd like to welcome everyone to this in-person event again. Finally, we do it in person again. This is the annual Friendship and Dialogue Dinner organized by the Dialogue Institute. 20 years ago, that's what we celebrated today, the 20th year. A handful of Muslims came together to form what we then called the Institute of Interfaith Dialogue, or IID for short. We renamed it to Dialogue Institute. Most of those handful of people were students or recent graduates from UT. Most of us were of Turkish origin and spoke broken English. I think we still do. Most of us did not know many people in Austin. Most of us didn't know anything about dialogue or how to engage other people. Most of us didn't know anything about other cultures and faith traditions. And actually, most of us didn't even know each other until we met here in Austin. And yet, this group of people endeavors to start an educational nonprofit with the mission to promote mutual understanding, respect and cooperation among people of diverse faiths and cultures by creating opportunities for direct communication and a meaningful shared experience. That was our mission statement that we came up with. You might wonder what motivated these people to start this and how did they find each other. After all, this was 20 years ago. Dialogue was not a cool thing to do, especially among Muslims. What all these people had in common was, at one time or other, they crossed paths with the Hizmet movement. Hizmet is a Turkish word for service. So you can call it the service movement, or some people call it the Gülen movement after the founder. This movement is a civil society movement committed to the ideals of serving humanity and living together in peace. And it works within the framework of social responsibility and philanthropy. It is centered on altruistic volunteerism and prioritizes three things: education, dialogue, and humanitarian aid. It's a peaceful movement that embraces diversity, as you can see today, and it is inspired by Islamic and universal values. I'd like to quote a quick sentence from the founder Gülen, talking about this movement. He says, "I believe and hope that the activities of the Hizmet volunteers devoted to these core values on the path of helping others live with the goal of God's pleasure will contribute significantly to the formation of a more livable world of peace and tranquility. May God bless those who contribute to this work." Out of all the components, Hizmet pays special attention to education. Hizmet volunteers give education as a means to achieve social development, equal opportunity, social justice, and peace. Towards these goals, participants establish schools, universities, tutoring centers, student housing, after-school programs, you name it, all around the world. Educational programs are shaped based on curriculum of the host country and include diverse fields of science, arts, social sciences, sports, language. They actively promote student participation from all segments of society. Given the emphasis on education, it is no surprise that in this very room we have quite a few volunteers, Hizmet volunteers, who have an education background. There might be one sitting at your table right now, and you might find out in a minute when you have the chance to dialogue. Another area that Hizmet participants devoted themselves toward is achieving peace through dialogue. Hizmet volunteers organize dialogue and civic engagement activities among people of different religions, races, traditions, cultures, and worldviews. These activities aim to establish societal peace, promote mutual knowledge and empathy, and willingness to accept everyone as they are. These activities include academic events, such as symposia, panels, and seminars, cultural events, such as festivals, trips, and family meetings, and I know many of you have attended some of these, spiritual events, such as joint prayers and iftar programs, and social responsibility projects, such as humanitarian relief activities. It is this aspect of Hizmet that motivated the formation of the Dialogue Institute. So when this group of people came together, they already had this background that this is something we should do. Despite all the shortcomings I mentioned earlier, not knowing anybody, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, these volunteers had one thing going for them, and that is sincerity. They sincerely believed in building bridges to create what we call peace islands in Central Texas. Peace islands where Texans from all backgrounds come together around common values. And I like to think what you see here right now, this is the Peace Island, where people with different backgrounds are here sharing a meal and coming together. Over the years, I witnessed, especially at the very beginning, when we didn't know anything, I witnessed young men with practically no English. I'm not saying little English, I'm saying no English. Visit the church Sunday service week after week to establish dialogue. Not with words, but by demonstrating his sincerity to his conduct, just by showing up and being there. And it worked, because at my last count, the Dialogue Institute had 14 chapters in 6 states. So Austin is just one of them. Organizing many impactful events throughout the year to bring people together and encourage them to respect their differences and work towards a common goal. A common goal that's written in all our holy books, which is love your neighbor. I'd like to thank you for being here to show your support for our organization, which works hard to help create those peace islands by promoting mutual understanding, respect, and cooperation. What started with those handful of people or volunteers 20 years ago would not be here without the support of people like you. So, thank you. I'd like to especially thank our advisory board members who have been supporting us and contributing their time, energy, and resources for the past 20 years. We have some friends from the very beginning. Not all are here tonight, but I'd like to ask all past and present advisory board members to stand up to be recognized. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank our friend Judy for making this event special with your presence. Thank you. I also like to thank Mrs. Sümeyye Akın for demonstrating the fascinating traditional art of calligraphy. I don't know where she is. Maybe she can stand up. She is still outside. I'd like to thank Mr. Erdem Balıkçı for his amazing water marbling, what we call Ebru in Turkish, presentation, if he's here. Thank you. And Mr. Yahya Görar for his traditional Saz Bağlama performance, although it was quite loud and many people couldn't hear it. Thank you anyway. I also like to thank all Hizmet volunteers who have contributed to our organization over the past 20 years. The world has changed quite a bit over those years. I mean, think just about the past 2-3 years. But one constant is the dedication of our volunteers and the generosity of our sponsors who made all this work possible. I'd like to thank all of you as well. Once again, I'd like to welcome all of you to our Friendship and Dialogue dinner, and thank you for your support. I hope you enjoyed tonight, and thank you.
I want to invite everybody to watch a video about the Dialogue Institute now. building those all-important peace islands. I want to leave you about those peace islands sometimes. We need them more and more in our world today. So a few announcements before dinner. First of all, you see a little tumbler at your place. That is a keepsake for you to remember tonight and to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Friendship and Dialogue Dinner. There's also a bag that we handed as you leave that has more souvenirs for you from tonight. And the silent auction is still going on for a little while longer. There's some beautiful bowls and plates that are up for grabs tonight, and I saw some prices that could keep being raised to raise more money for the Dialogue Institute tonight, so please go out there and make your bid. And finally, enjoy your dinner and dialogue tonight at the table, and we'll be back in just a little while with the program.
on education that changes the world, and dialogue, talking with other people, no matter how different from you they may be, is what will build islands of peace in this world. And if you're here and you'd like to support the Dialogue Institute, on your table, there's an envelope that looks like this, and you can either put a check in there, or as a nod to moving into the current century, there's a barcode you can scan, just like this. So please help us continue this very valuable work of dialogue. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne, and don't forget the silent auction is still open, so this would be a good time to go outbid your neighbor and get one of those beautiful bowls or plates that you had your eye on. Now I'd like to invite Dr. James Puglisi to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Puglisi is a Dialogue Institute Advisory Board member. I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. I'm honored to have the task of providing an introduction to our keynote speaker, Dr. John Esposito, who, in my opinion, as a Roman Catholic lay minister, is a rock star in the study of interfaith and dialogue and religious studies, and particularly looking at the world of Islam and the community there. As a Roman Catholic, I was first introduced to the idea of interfaith dialogue while a graduate theology student at Will and Jesuit University, where I was introduced to the landmark Catholic document Nostra Aetate, which means in our time, which is the first two words of the document is a Catholic faith. This document came out of the Vatican II Council held in the early 1960s, a council that was wrestling with what it meant to be a Catholic church in response to the horrors of the Holocaust, as well as how the church would move from its historic tendency of religious isolation to one of engagement as part of the local community. There are a few minds in the Catholic tradition that have been as active and prolific in expanding the religious literacy of the Catholic Church, but also so many others across the globe, literally, than Dr. John Esposito. If I read his complete bio, it would most likely take longer than the presentation he's going to give you.
Take your time.
Yes. He also said, if I talk long, he'll talk short. If I talk short, he'll talk long. He caught a break in that I was using the same bio as the person doing your program. So much of what I was going to say, you can read for yourself now. As you look down through the titles and the various awards and exposure that he has had, both in the United States and across the world, and you look at the titles, you'll know that they are not about dogmatic discussions between theologians, but it's a look at the world and how people engage each other and how people engage in relationships across our different religious traditions. He's a person of the people, a person trying to help us navigate a very complex, diverse, pluralistic, and wonderfully created world by our Creator God. So I really encourage you to look at that list. I won't read it now like I was going to. I first met Dr. Esposito when we were privileged to host him as our guest speaker for the Nostra Aetate lecture when I worked at St. Edward's University. After the lecture, our committee treated him to a dinner afterwards. My memory of that dinner was not one of theological discussions, although I'm sure there was some of that. We ended up talking about our pets, our cats and our dogs. And I remember him describing that despite the cold weather, he would, when it was time to walk the dog, whether he was wearing walking shorts or pants or whatever, he would just get on his slippers, put on his trench coat, and walk into the wintry weather of Washington, D.C., while everyone around him was dressed in parkas and boots and hoods doing the same thing. It's a Brooklyn, New York thing. It's who he is. It reminded me of my own dad, who would have done something very similar. I tell that story because while he is this brilliant, prolific scholar, he is a genuine human person, still in touch with his shared humanity. He shares a similar immigrant-rooted history in the United States, such as my own Sicilian-born grandparents who immigrated here many years ago, and many of you also are immigrants in this country. We all share a similar story. He makes you feel at home with him. I think that is reflected in the core of his writings. A pursuit of exploring, understanding, and bridging the lived life of people as we move individually and corporately through a religiously pluralistic world. Having served as the keynote speaker for the very first Friendship and Dialogue dinner, I can't think of someone better to return to our podium on this 20th anniversary of the Friendship and Dialogue dinner. May I present to you Dr. John Esposito.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I was thinking when I was sitting at the table a number of years ago, I was invited to Mexico to speak at an international conference for scientists. And I thought I was coming here to talk about Islam and its relationship to science or whatever. But instead, what they told me was at the last minute that I was going to be debating scientists with regard to the existence of God. And the way they would do the program is they would shut all the lights off. They had thousands of people there. And then they would start to put the lights on. You had to run up on the stage, and they would play a theme song. And for me, it was the theme from Rocky. But today, I was watching the opening, and the music is from Beethoven's Five Secrets. And I'm very emotional about that. As you can see that. But you really have to listen to that by the piano guys. You can get it, on the internet. Beethoven says something like, it's a line that sort of talks about the music and the extent to which you can feel it, you can touch God. And it goes right through you. Anyway, I wanted to reassure you that I know that most of you are sitting there thinking, I wonder how long this is going to be. And in about 10 minutes, you'll be thinking even more. I'll be close to the end. I can't guarantee that. What I want to do today, and I'm probably going to look at my notes more than I normally do, because I want to lead you down a lane to understand just how important what the Dialogue Institute does, how important it was when they did it after 9/11, but how important it remains. When I first came here 20 years ago, I was very impressed at how they were established and they were running programs. But when I left, I thought, okay, you've got people that are really committed. The question was, will you be able to pull the community in? Because that's always the challenge when you do programs. Not just pulling in, as it were, your family, as it were, your broader family, religiously or culturally, but the broader community. And when I came down tonight, I thought, what the hell is going on down here? I didn't realize it was all of you. I heard this huge crowd, with all this. To turn out this kind of audience is absolutely remarkable. And it says something about what they've accomplished, let alone in my conversations today, about the other dialogue institutes that have been created in different places. Let me just begin briefly by telling you who I am so you know where I'm coming from on this. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I'm Italian-American, that's part of my identity. I was a Capuchin Franciscan. I went in at 14, I left at 24. Been married 57 years. If you start computing, you can get into what my age is. And I turn 99 next year, so I don't have much to be excited about. I had no interest in Islam. I was trained to be a Catholic theologian at the time of Vatican II. I taught Catholic theology. I went to Temple University to do a PhD. I wanted to get a PhD in Catholicism, but not go to a Catholic university because I had all this Catholic education. And I never wound up taking a course in Catholicism because you had to take a course in world religions. And no, I did not get interested in Islam. I got interested in Hinduism and Zen Buddhism. When I was ready to write a dissertation in Hinduism, the chairman of the department encouraged me. He said, the last scholar that we are getting, the interesting thing about the department was covering the world's religions. So you had different religions, and they were hiring a Muslim, Ismail al-Faruqi, a Palestinian Muslim. He said, you really should do something with him. I knew nothing about Islam or Muslims. I had seen the movie The Exodus. And if you saw the movie The Exodus, you would not exactly feel that you needed to hang out with Arabs or Muslims. And so I kept declining. The chair was very strong in suggesting it. I was married and realized that I needed to get out of the program. So I went and I offered to take the course. The person who was my mentor, Ismail Farouki, said, let's plan your courses. I said, why would I plan courses? He said, so you can major in Islam. Why would I major in Islam? I'm not going to do it. About a month and a half later, he called me in to study Arabic. He said, fill out an application to go to the University of Pennsylvania because you can get a scholarship and study it during the summer. I said, why did I study Arabic? He said, because then if you have Arabic, you can get your PhD in Islamic studies. I said, but I'm not doing it. He said, sit down and sign. And I was married and I thought I don't want to fail the course. So, and then the rest became history. Now, why I went into that field makes no sense to me because I talked my brother and his wife years ago out of their PhD program in philosophy because there were no jobs. There were no jobs when I finished my degree in the mid-70s to teach Islam. I didn't teach Islam, I taught world religions. And I didn't teach Islam until the Iranian Revolution. I couldn't publish books, nobody invited me to talk. That was going to be my career. And then the Iranian Revolution came. I owe my career and my first Lexus to Ayatollah Khomeini. I went from an old Toyota to a Lexus like that. So the idea that that would happen, okay, the only problem with that is that for most Americans, their engagement, there were Muslims in America, but they were invisible because they would have been identified as Egyptian or Lebanese, etc. But not that they were Muslim. I was raised in New York. There were no mosques that I ever remember seeing. Mosques were relatively invisible. The oldest mosques in the United States were in Iowa and not in Boston. The Boston Mosque was actually outside of Boston. So there was no sense. So for most people, the engagement with Islam was putting on the TV and seeing people chanting death to America every day. And then also that the news program at night, which was about, America held hostage, as it were. It was that set the tones for many people. And to the extent of its invisibility, Islam was not present in most educational institutions, primary schools, secondary schools, or even universities. Most people who taught Islam, I think I was the first person to get a PhD in a religion department in Islam. Okay. Diplomats who were going overseas were not trained to understand the religion and culture. Military were not trained. The two major professional organizations, the Middle East Studies Association and the American Academy of Religion, had virtually no coverage. The American Academy of Religion sees itself as the Academy of Religion, but it was Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. And so it took a number of years to actually demonstrate that you could have an audience that would actually come and want to see Islam. So against that background, and media had no coverage. Then the media that you were exposed to was the Iranian Revolution. And I can remember, I was among the first academics to go into Iran after it. And the images were there. You walk into a hotel, and the question was, were you going to step on the American flag? That was marked up. You had pictures of Ayatollah Khomeini, etc. I met with Khomeini's family, and the young guys that brought me there were all laughing, and I was talking to his daughter, and I had, in those days, for about 25 years, I had quite a big beard and long hair. And I had taken my beard off. And so they showed it, and she said, why did you take your beard off? And her face was covered. And I said, I always wanted a beard. I grew up when I was a Franciscan. I said, but I'm getting older, and your beard becomes white. And I was making this all up. And she said, I like men with beards. And when she said it, I looked over her, and she had a huge picture of her father. And I thought, oh my God. And I broke into such a sweat that she could see. It was so visible. So she moved it away and smiled at me. But for Americans, people just had no sense. American diplomats, the Foreign Service Institute, did not really develop programs. And I worked with the person that developed it until 1984, 1985. That was years after. So against that background, to then have 9/11, was inconceivable. This was the major attack on the United States and what happened with that, and then the kind of media coverage that followed that. What I want to do is walk you down the lane in terms of that post-period and how we get here, and I'll do it as briefly as I can. Just take this paper off. All right. In the 1990s, you began to see, in light of the Iranian Revolution, debates about and talk about whether or not Islam was a danger. And you had a famous piece written called The Clash of Civilizations, which became an instant global to read all over the world. I was involved in a debate in Saudi Arabia with Sam Huntington, the guy that wrote it. But I remember after that, I'd have Muslim friends in Malaysia, Pakistan, write to me and say, can you get Huntington to come here? You know, can you get him? I mean, and Huntington was saying that he was a very famous professor at Harvard, had been in government, and published all over, but this was the book. And that phrase, Clash of Civilizations, existed today, even though at times it doesn't mean exactly what he was saying. But what he was saying at that time was that there was a very good chance that there would be a clash between Islam and the West. And he put it that way. He didn't just say between some Muslim countries in the West. In his article, he said, Islam has bloody borders. Not Muslim countries have bloody borders. But if you did say that, you'd be saying, yeah, Muslims are fighting Muslims in Egypt, Syria, Sudan, which would show it's not religious what was going on. In his book, he said, not only does Islam have bloody borders, Islam has bloody innards, meaning the religion itself has bloody innards. And I did a TV program in Washington, and I and the moderator asked him why he said that, and he let that go. As a result of that notion of clash, in the subsequent years, you had the leading up to 9/11, you had the portrayal of Islam by authors as a triple threat. A political threat, a military threat, and a demographic threat. The demographic threat with the phrase, the Muslims are coming, the Muslims are coming. Okay? Now, the reason I'm familiar with that phrase is that I wrote a book at that time called The Islamic Threat, Myth or Reality. The whole notion was that with the end of the Cold War, and in light of the First Gulf War, there was a chance that Islam would be seen as the next global threat. And I remember going to the State Department to brief the Secretary for, I think it was Human Rights, I forget now. And the first thing he said to me, that you had elections in Algeria and the Islamic movement was winning in the elections. And they were not extremists at that point, at all. But he was asking, is it another Iran? And I was saying, there's a hell of a difference between Algeria and Iran. And I said, are you thinking that Islam is going to be a global threat? And he said, no. But then later he said, but actually it's the only global ideological alternative. So the idea that you, suddenly the awareness of Muslims, which you didn't know anything about, many people wouldn't have known how many Muslims there were, suddenly one became aware of the fact that you had all of these countries that were Muslim, and you had this huge population that was Muslim. And so that notion laid the background and was picked up by media. Media in America, media in Europe. So that when 9/11 came, this really put things over the top in terms of the kind of coverage and the way Islam was portrayed. One need only remember what happened at that time. I was asked to do an interview on Fox, and the journalist who was doing it was a young journalist, blonde. I describe her as blonde because my wife's blonde, and my mother used to say that when I used to wear a Roman collar, I would always still turn to look at a blonde as she walked by. So when I brought my wife home, my mother just thought, that's it, it's logical. But she's just a nice person. The president had just been speaking, and a senior military. And so I started to talk about the Muslim world and the issue of Muslim, Muslim-West relations, etc. And she said, are you deaf? And this was live, and I just looked at that. She said, did you hear what they just said? This is a global war on terrorism. In other words, Taking it literally, this is a global war on terrorism. Terrorism is all over the world, and we're going to fight it all over the world. Interestingly enough, I did a program in Britain for the equivalent, like, military side of things. And in that off-the-record session, the fellow who ran it said the one thing that he regretted was that Bush and Blair used that phrase, that it was a global war against terrorism, because that stuck there. The idea that instead of you've got today close to 2 billion Muslims. Back then it would have been maybe 1.5 billion Muslims. And maybe 1% or 0.5% of these really deadly terrorists exist, but the vast majority of Muslims and their religion is something else. That was lost in most conversations. And that's what fed the growth of Islamophobia. Islamophobia is an exaggerated fear and portrayal of Islam that can lead to hate speech, but also hate crimes, violence, and unwarranted imprisonment. So to give you an example of what I'm talking about here, in terms of statistics, in the first 2 years after 9/11, and these statistics come from, at times I'm going to refer to a reference, because if I'm going to say something, I want you to know it's not just my opinion, it comes from other people, and there's data for this. David Cole wrote an incredible book called Less Safe, Less Free, and it's a great read. To have a lawyer or a scholar write a book that's very readable can be a little rare. And his book is just terrific. What did he point out? In the first 2 years after 9/11, the United States locked up over 5,000 foreign nationals in preventive detention. In the first 2 years. After that, it sought 8,000 Arab and Muslim men for FBI interviews. Not because they'd necessarily done anything, but they came in. 80,000 Arabs and Muslim foreign nationals for special registration, fingerprinting, and photographing. The idea was to find the terrorists in our midst. The phrase was embedded cells. Not one of these people, in fact, it's not one of these men. It's interesting. They were all men, boy. Not one of these men up to that time had been found guilty of anything. None of these people. But we were able, under the new ways in which we dealt with things, to bring people in even when we didn't have evidence that they had done anything. Now, that's not to say that we haven't had a problem with some homegrown terrorists, in the United States. But in terms of thousands and thousands of people being brought in, I spoke to a group of businessmen and I said, that's like doing what we did to the Japanese, potentially. To which I heard 3 people say, and it worked. It was, but that's the mentality that we were, that we were developing. And that allowed us, for example, when it came to Iraq, and we couldn't find weapons of mass destruction, to basically wind up talking about the fact that it was necessary to get Saddam Hussein out in the name of democracy. And how did George W. Bush legitimate it? Now, there are parts of George W. Bush that no, I can't quite go that far. Okay. Anyway, I got distracted with that. Yeah. Okay. So, what I did like was that he did say to people, it's not the religion of Islam. But on the other hand, he would then say things like, what do they hate? They hate who we are. Our democracy, well, who are they? When you're doing the they. He didn't say those terrorists, but not all of those Muslims. And so when we couldn't find weapons of mass destruction, it became the promotion of democracy that justified going in to take Saddam out. But it also justified the occupation for several years. And the irony about that is that Bush quite rightly did say, and this is important for what's going on today in terms of American policy, Bush did say that the United States had practiced democratic exceptionalism. That is, that he, in his first term, and presidents before him, Democrat and Republican, while promoting democracy in the world, are saying it practiced democratic exceptionalism when it came to the Muslim world. In other words, authoritarian rulers, we could accept them because it fit our domestic policies, our international policies. That has had repercussions down through the years, including the Arab Spring, the overthrow of the governments in the region, but then the pulling back. Obama himself refused to call a coup a coup. It was a military coup. So the implications for that, were there. Now, there were responses to this danger. 3 in particular I'll refer to because they were significant responses, but also because I know something about it because I was involved in it. One was in 2004, when for the first time you had the Secretary General Kofi Annan basically giving an address on Islamophobia. There was no massive public talk about Islamophobia to the extent that in this speech, in which he said, some claim that Islam is incompatible with democracy or irrevocably hostile to modernity and the rights of women. And in too many circles, disparaging remarks about Muslims are allowed to pass without censure, with the result that prejudice acquires a veneer of acceptability. Ironically, only a few years ago, Baroness Warsi of the House of Lords in the UK said, both in the UK and in a speech at Georgetown, that in the UK, Islamophobia had become accepted dinner talk. So you could engage in an Islamophobic conversation of prejudice, etc. Thank you. Oh no, it's supposed to be Bombay Sapphire. But the fact is that Baroness Warsi could say that within the society, and that is a problem that the Brits have had if you follow what's going on in the UK. A year later, Kofi Annan and the UN created the Alliance of Civilizations. Why the Alliance of Civilizations? The whole idea was people think there's a clash of civilizations. We need to address the clash of civilizations. So they created an Alliance of Civilizations. And there were about 12 of us involved. It included Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa, but also former foreign ministers, etc. The Alliance existed today, running conferences in many parts of the world, dealing with and reaching out to policymakers, but also to youth, to deal with this whole question of, are we talking about a clash of civilizations? What does that mean to think in terms of clash of civilizations? It's one thing if you talk about there's a clash in a restricted way, but if you say it's a clash of civilizations, it really means one side against the other, the whole side. So there's a clash between the West and Islam. I mean, that kind of generalization, which therefore means everybody gets brushstroke. If you're an Italian American, you know what it is to be brushstroked in terms of mafia. When I was in the monastery and even after, people who were not Italian would always talk to me as if I had an inside track on the mafia. I was in a meeting in Qatar with diplomats from all over the world, but particularly with a group of Americans and Brits. And we were talking about a plan that we had that we needed to implement and back home in the US and also overseas. And so different people were saying, well, I think I have this influence or that. And then there was a group that they didn't think we could get to. And I said, don't worry, my cousin Guido can take care of that. Well, half of the audience thought it was a joke. I could see in the eyes of others, they thought I had a cousin Guido. And I still use that in situations because I will now say that my cousin Guido says, because I'll always say if I don't like somebody, we'll take him out and break his legs. I will now say, my cousin Guido says, hey Johnny, why break his legs? The Pope's excommunicated us. Either one is a mortal sin. So why don't I just kill him? Then we take care of the problem. But this stereotyping of Islam and Muslims is so absolutely common that I've been in conversations where people say things that you would never say about anybody else. I'm talking about leading you through the years. Things are getting better, but they're also getting worse. That'll be my conclusion, and I'll try to demonstrate that. And then finally, the World Economic Forum set up a council of 100 leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, I mean, you name it. And the whole purpose was, for a number of years, to run major events there and then carry it out of leaders that were going to be dealing with, again, moving beyond the notion of clash. Obviously, for the World Economic Forum, it has to do with international trade, international politics, etc. But all of those things were out there. And then you had, in 2010, for the first time in U.S. history, a major publication, Time Magazine, having a cover that said, "Is America Islamophobic?" On the cover. CNN immediately picked up on it. They weren't used to it. I got flown into New York to do a whole segment of segments because they weren't even used to that kind of issue. Why? Because if you read the article, what they concluded was yes. And they gave examples. They went out and did, research in different, areas. I mean, you had sad stories like, and I've known these cases. You'd be in the Midwest, you have a physician who was a Muslim and very popular in the community. Got along with everybody. And then at a certain point, some of the Muslims decided they wanted to build a small mosque. No. Several years ago, you had the mayor of a New Jersey, former mayor of a New Jersey city, not Jersey City, but of a city in New Jersey, who was very popular. And he and some friends, it took them several years to build a mosque in his city. So he was okay, but the idea of a mosque was a symbol of something that people didn't want. And so we had instances after 9/11 across the country of mosques being attacked, of Muslims. Right after 9/11, I flew to LA. I canceled the trip initially because it was right after 9/11. I figured they didn't want to have it. And the Muslim community said, "Please come, because if you don't come, it'll reinforce for people the issue." So I get there and I'm waiting for the car to pick me up. And a car goes by and on the back it says, "Kill them all and let Allah decide." And this kind of thing could easily be done in those days, in public. Hold on, I'll be finishing very soon. And I often used to say this, I haven't said it in years, but I will introduce this. I'm looking at an audience, and at the end of my talk, I will come back into the audience and pick out 3 people who I think have paid the most attention and kept their eyes on me. I will lay my hands on them and cure them of any disease that they have. And I'm serious. If you don't have a disease, take it as a chip. 10 years from now, you have a disease, say my name, and you will be cured. Let's take a look at what data tells us about American Muslims. And one of the things that Dagi Mogahed of Gallup and I did, Gallup did several years of looking at 35 Muslim countries and interviewed people in every part of the country, remote villages, etc., in local languages, not calling them up. And we did a book called Who Speaks for Islam? Would a Billion Muslims Really Think? And what did the data really tell us? Well, in contrast to polls of Americans at that time, who were asked what they thought about Muslims, you had 57% of Americans, when asked what they most admire about Muslim societies, offered 2 responses: nothing or I don't know. 33% disclosed that they believed that Muslim Americans were more sympathetic to terrorists. 60% said they had negative feelings towards Muslims. Less than half thought U.S. Muslims could be loyal citizens. Many thought that they should have special IDs. But what could we say about the Muslim community at that time? From data that came from Gallup and also others. They come from far more than 68 or 70 countries, many of them. They're second, third generation. They're integrated educationally, economically, and increasingly politically. They span the socioeconomic spectrum, now members of Congress, businessmen, lawyers, also cab drivers. After 9/11, I used to do car service, and it was called, what was it called? It had a phrase, and I never thought of it as being necessarily Islamic, you know? But yet all the drivers were Muslim. But I never thought of it, that was anything. But after 9/11, they changed their name. Maybe they had something like Green such and such before that. But they, you know, they changed their name. Educationally, Muslims are second to American Jews in terms of education. And significantly, Muslim women are as educated as Muslim men, sometimes more educated. All of that in stark contrast to what popular media was saying about it. 40%, and this was a number of years ago, had college degrees versus other Americans, 29%. 31% were full-time students compared to 10% of the general population. Regarding religion, 77% of Muslims surveyed said they worship the same God as Christians and Jews. 84% said Muslims should strongly emphasize shared values. This is where Dialogue Institute and Dialogue Institutes become critical. And I'll come back to that in a second. Let me move beyond this because I see some people are restless. No, the problem that we ran into is the failure to distinguish between the faith and the values of the vast majority of Muslims. What I'm saying sounds like a no-brainer, okay? We fail to distinguish between the faith and values of the vast majority, and we equate them with the hijacking of religion by a terrorist minority. And that generalization just takes traction. And in the end, I'll tell you, it's becoming worse globally. I'm working with a colleague, Oxford will be bringing out a book on global Islamophobia and populism. It's actually getting worse at a global scale. So what can we say about American Muslims in very recent years? Well, ISBU, which is a research institute for social policy and understanding. Dali Mogahed is the head of the research, former Gallup leader. They survey, and my center sometimes has been associated with the survey that is helping to fund it. They survey Muslims, Jews, Protestants, and Catholics to examine their attitudes on various issues from politics and religion to violence and identity. What emerged from the results is a profile of a Muslim community that emphasizes the economy, Islamophobia, and education as important priorities. A significant number of Muslims, actually Muslims are more optimistic than any other religious group about America. Okay, clearly that's a cut of Muslims. For example, if you were to talk about African American Muslims, not all, but many, they're in a different socioeconomic, still, status. But Muslims are, despite the fact that they identify discrimination, more than 50% that they've experienced or that friends have, and that they're particularly worried about their kids being bullied in school, regularly being bullied, sometimes every day. And the reality is still there. Just the other day we had an alert. Georgetown, we get these alerts when anything happens on the campus or near the campus, usually if somebody's been stopped or robbed or whatever. And it was a group of young students walking, one or more women wearing a hijab, and people, guys shouting, physically grabbing them, etc. These things still happen and can happen in the heart of Georgetown, on M Street, or any place in the country. When Muslims are asked about what's important to them and why they vote, they see it as a civic duty, they want to make a difference, and they want to make sure that their vote counts. I must say The Muslim vote has increased significantly, but it's still lower than most other groups. But it's increased significantly, and hopefully in the vote in Georgia, that's happening too. So Muslims are as likely as Protestants to have a strong sense of American identity, and percentage-wise, as likely as conservative Protestants in terms of faith being important to them, going to mosque regularly being important to them. That profile becomes very important. They are as likely as other Americans to identify strongly with their faith. 89% of Muslims, then 84% of Jews, and at least 95% of Catholics and Protestants. Okay? Parentheses, from my point of view personally, Catholics have swung too many of them to the right. It used to be that if you looked up the Christian right on Wikipedia or whatever, it was Protestant groups that were there. Now, a very significant number of Catholics are there. And for me, that is an issue. I didn't intend to say it, but it came out. We'll wipe that out, edit that out. Muslims are engaged in their communities to a significant degree. 38% in terms of when we look at it, Jews 40%, Catholics 42%. We're still ahead. Okay, this is all ironic when I kid this way, because the issue I've always had is people who attack me all the time because they say that I'm a Muslim. And Muslims who think that I am a Muslim. And I was in a private meeting with European and American diplomats in the UAE, but in a remote area. And I had spoken, and then there was a panel at the end, and like you, I was getting restless, and I was the last speaker. The guy before me, if I mentioned his name, you would know it. Was a very prominent and really great speaker, Muslim speaker, from the West Coast. I'll get close and throw out the university, and then you can run a look on. He went on and on and on, and I thought, I'm not going to say anything. So I just said, I'm not going to say anything, but because this is off the record and it's closed, and I know I can do it, I'm going to answer a question that has been raised about me for the last 40 years. And I said, it's difficult, but I know you'll stay in this room. And I said, it's true. And I waited for about 3 minutes, and I went like this, and I said, yeah, it's absolutely true. I may as well say it now. I do dye my hair. Okay? The young Muslims came to me and they said, they were all going, mashallah, mashallah, mashallah. They said, you're really disappointed. The Europeans were looking at me like, what's he been drinking? I just had like no idea where the hell I came from. Okay, so I want to bring this to a close, the way forward. That was the worst part of doing this, to talk about the way forward. I used to be able to do it easily, but things are getting better, but they're also getting worse. You know? What's the way forward if we're looking at domestic politics, depending on your politics, or European politics? If you're looking at the UK, if you're looking at Austria, if you're looking at France and Austria, where you have seen as liberal progressive governments swinging to the right when it comes to Muslims and their rights within their societies. One of my researches was one of, I forget now, 50 or 80 families in Austria in a 900 police and security person raid in the middle of the night. Everything seized, being accused of whatever, assets frozen, bank account, etc., etc. They still haven't been found guilty of anything. But that kind of thing could happen in Vienna. You know, let alone some of the other things that we see. So, okay, we all have a role to play. People of all faiths and of no faith. Democrats and Republicans and independents. I almost left out the independents, so I had to write that in. We bringing to bear our cherished American principles and values concerning freedom of religion, religious pluralism, and civil liberties. An observation to be made from the document called Common Word, which was put together by 130 originally Muslim leaders internationally, and that ballooned up and responded to by about as many Christian scholars, etc. And in there, what they said was that in fact Islam and Christianity are far and away the two largest global religions. An estimated 1.97 billion Muslims. They didn't say this, I got the latest numbers now, okay? And 2.56 billion adherents, Christian adherents. And so they basically say Christians and Muslims are this predominant number in the world, and in a world that faces global catastrophe. And so basically said we have to work together. And the basis for that, even though they were talking about Islam and Christianity, they included Judaism in the statement that they were saying, is the basis is that we have love of God and love of neighbor. Now those notions are to be found in other religious traditions, but not in those words. But that recognition that we have this population of people that come out of traditions that basically say, if you really think about it, the idea that to be a good Muslim or Christian or Jew, it has to be love of God and love of neighbor. I know, I can't believe I'm saying this either. I know my wife and I would be like, be in church and it would say, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others who have, and I lean over to her and I'll often give her two names and say, it's not going to happen now. I'm not ready. I'm just not ready. And it's still a problem. But anyway, that's this other side of my spiritual life. Okay, so what we need to do, it seems to me, is more and more talk about the importance of coexistence. And we need to see what this means in terms of as we go forward. Now, although I focused, and this is the end, only 3 paragraphs, stay awake. Although I focused on America, I'd be remiss if I did not mention that both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism have increased not only in America, but internationally, and at times exponentially. CNN did a major poll called A Shadow Over Europe, in which it reports anti-Semitic stereotypes are alive and well in Europe, while the memory of the Holocaust is starting to fade. This is still part of a quote. More than a quarter of Europeans polled believe Jews have too much influence in business and finance. Nearly 1 in 4 said Jews have too much influence in conflict and wars across the world. 1 in 5 said they have too much influence in the media, and the same number believe they have too much influence in politics. Global Islamophobia exists now across the world. The major places to see it is China, where you have genocide, Myanmar, former Burma, where you have genocide, and today, shockingly, in India, which is celebrated as a secular democracy, but under Modi and the Hindutva approach, the approach is to say that India is a Hindu nation, and we've had major discrimination and violence against Muslims in India. If you want to see any data on this, go to bridge.georgetown.edu. I created a thing called the Bridge Initiative, Protecting Pluralism, Ending Islamophobia. We have 1.1 million followers on Facebook. You go to that site, bridge.georgetown.edu. You'll see all kinds of data on countries, on people, on events from the United States across. You'll look at members of Congress, you'll see presidents and the people that surround them. So for me, the important thing to take away from this today is that you are blessed. You are blessed to have something like the Dialogue Institute here, and to have those institutes generated throughout Texas and in other places in the United States. And the extent to which you participate gives me enormous hope about the future. I'm not saying this to please anybody, although I liked your check, thank you. It's outstanding the kind of turnout you get, the numbers that you get, the diversity that you get. I'm in DC, and it's hard to pull this together. And the fact that the very way that you conducted the whole opening and the way you moved through this For many of you who've come to these meetings, you'll think this is normal. It's still not quite there, okay? I can remember when you could really see it sometimes how nervous Muslim communities were when you would go and there would be the sense that they had to have the American flag and sing the Star Spangled Banner. Now, I have nothing against the American flag and the Star Spangled Banner, but it was, you know, missing the whole point, or the idea of interreligious dialogue. You know, many of you don't really have any sense that the way most of us were raised in my generation, and for a good generation after that, and yet another generation, was that you had your faith and other people had their faith. But it wasn't that you really came together. It wasn't that you came together and actually had prayers said, you know, or worked together in the way. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm glad to be here for the 20th anniversary. Invite me back for the 40th. I'll only be 102. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your insight, Dr. Esposito. That was beautiful. And I love that you're a man who cries. I'm Italian American and I know about the tears. I don't have a cousin Guido, but I have a father Vince.
I want to announce, I say this publicly, and I mean this. If you have a wedding or a funeral, I don't have to know you. I come free.
Free for weddings and funerals, we have it. Well, one of the places we need to build more peace islands is certainly in Washington, where you're from. But I think we've done a good job building some peace islands between Travis and Williamson County in recent years. And we failed to acknowledge our Williamson County Commissioner, Terry Cook. We don't want to do that. So Terry, please stand up and let us recognize you. We so appreciate you being here. Well, now we come to the part of our program where you're going to be enlightened and entertained by Whirling Dervish. And let me tell you just a little bit about your entertainment tonight. Anur Kasaburi received his bachelor's degree from Ege University with a degree in Turkish music and dance techniques. He has visited many European countries to perform and present Turkish culture. He has also served on the Folklore Music Youth Club's board for more than 6 years and is near Turkey. He has been living in Dallas, Texas since 2013, and besides his artistic career and projects, he is working as a software engineer. He obviously can use both sides of his brain, so please welcome Whirling Dervish. beautiful message, beautiful movement. Thank you, everyone. We have one more video before our Peace Awards. It's a thank you video. So can we roll that now?
Hello, I'm former U.S. Congressman Pete Gallego. Many thanks and congratulations to the Dialogue Institute for 20 years of helping us understand each other better, of teaching us that we have much more in common than we have in our differences, and of inspiring us to help our friends and our neighbors and to see the good in everyone. You've made Central Texas and all of Texas a much better place. Thanks for your years of dedication, devotion, and effort. And here's to the next 20 years.
Congratulations to the Dialogue Institute at Austin for 20 years here. I have wonderful memories of the trip that you arranged for us to go to Turkey to meet the wonderful people there, to introduce us to that culture, as well as to the beautiful religion of Islam. And we're also grateful to be introduced to so many wonderful Turkish people here in the city.
We want to congratulate you, Dialogue Institute, because you're an amazing Austin asset. You walk the walk, showing how different people from different cultures and different religions can live in harmony and benefit from the richness of our friendship. Thank you.
Hi, this is David and Anna Gomez-Sterrett, and we want to say congratulations and happy anniversary to the Dialogue Institute of Austin. We were fortunate enough in 2008 to go on a trip, and we learned so much about Turkey, about the Islamic faith, about the culture and warmth of the Turkish people, and we're eternally grateful, and we wish you all the best in the coming years.
I'm going to talk about the watermelons.
Oh, and there were great watermelons. We went in the summer, it was wonderful.
I think the one word I can sum it all up is patience, and particularly the patience that Gunnar had with me for all of my travel problems, losing my money belt, him losing his suitcase that same trip, the little stress balls and all the little kids that came up. But it was a great trip, and I wish you all the best. Happy 20th anniversary.
Hi, this is Donna Howard, State Representative for House District 48, wishing happy anniversary, 20th anniversary to the Dialogue Institute. We go back to the very beginning, and I am so grateful to be friends with so many people in this organization who have helped me to expand my understanding of our culturally diverse interfaith community, and who have been so welcoming of me and my particular faith tradition and my beliefs. And we've had some wonderful dialogues, expanded, I think, our understanding of each other, but our community is better because of your being here. So thank you so much for your presence. Thank you for your friendship, and hoping you'll be here for at least another 20 years. Happy anniversary.
Just a few of the hundreds of lives have been touched by the Dialogue Institute in the past 20 years. It is now time to move on to the Golan Peace Awards, and this is an award given to an organization of individuals who have shown an exemplary service advancing peace and dialogue. Fethullah Gulen is the Turkish Muslim scholar, author, and educational activist. Mr. Gulen has been recognized for his strong support for interfaith and intercultural dialogue, science, democracy, and spirituality. To present our award, I would like to invite up Angelica Gomez, who is with the Austin Jews and Partners of Refugees, our award winners tonight. Angelica?
Thank you everyone for having us here. We are so grateful for this award. It is my honor to introduce the coordinators of Austin Jews and Partners for Refugees, Nancy Wolf and Russ Apple. But before I introduce them, I want to say a little bit about Austin Jews and Partners for Refugees. Austin Jews and Partners for Refugees began last year when a couple of Jewish folks got together and started this work of working with refugees. As they started the work, many other interfaith organizations wanted to be part of the work as well, and so it became Austin Jews and Partners for Refugees. We've helped over 1,000 Afghans have been helped here in Austin. I have been working with HJPR for the last year and have seen how they have partnered with everyone who wants to support our community and have helped Afghans, have not only helped Afghans, but helped us become more self-sufficient and supported our path, hopefully becoming integrated in Austin. I have worked with them as a volunteer and also as the program coordinator for Salam Neighbors, which has helped about 100 Afghans with a program that helps integration after the 3-month period is over. AJPR has demonstrated how people of different faiths can come together to help people in need. They have been like firefighters putting out crisis during the first phase of this effort to resettle refugees and are now moving into a more strategic group to help finish the job. It has been a pleasure to be part of their team, and I look forward to working with them in the future. So without much intro, Russ and Nancy.
Well, thank you very much, Dialogue Institute. We were really surprised when we were given this honor and really blown away. There's a long Jewish tradition of welcoming the stranger. And Jews have been refugees since the time of the Exodus, through the Inquisition, through the pogroms, through the Holocaust. So we know a lot about refugees. And the first international refugee organization was started in 1880. It was called the Hebrew Immigrant Assistance Society, now called HIAS. They're in about 20 countries and have locations all over the U.S. My grandparents were assisted by them when they came to the United States. We started working with Refugee Services of Texas several years ago when there were only a few refugees coming in, and it was pretty easy. We set up an apartment, we gave them food, we hung out with them, and we did a family 2 or 3 times a year. In 2019, refugee services organizations all around the country have atrophied tremendously because of the prior administration. And 74,000 Afghans came to the United States in a matter of a few months. There weren't services, there weren't people. The government fortunately gave some money, but it was chaos. And we knew people at RST, and they allowed us to head up a volunteer organization, and volunteers from lots of different organizations asked if they could join with us, and that's how we went from Austin Jews for Refugees to Austin Jews and Partners for Refugees. It was chaotic and crazy, but it was also pretty wonderful to see how all these different organizations came together without ego, without prejudice, working together to help newcomers into the United States. And I guess we can measure success by saying that the dam didn't break. We had thousands of fingers sticking holes in that dike to make sure that nothing really bad happened. Nobody died, nobody went hungry, nobody didn't have clothing, but we're still working on it. And it's still a great task ahead for all of us to continue working and start new programs and really fully integrate our refugees. Austin's an incredibly expensive place to live. There's very limited housing and very little bit unaffordable. So there are still great challenges ahead to work and get these refugees resettled. But they have been incredibly gracious people. We've become great friends with refugees, the other organizations, and it shows that we all can really work together. And when we do, we create more than we could ever do on our own. Refugees are great for this country. They are resilient, they are survivors. I don't know if many of us could have gone through what they did, going through Kabul and dealing with the Taliban and leaving half their family behind and not knowing what's going to happen. So they are a great resource. All the statistics show that refugees help our country. They get great jobs, they're good workers, they become successes here, much more than the general population. So they also provide new blood, new thoughts, new ideas for the United States. So we're so pleased to be able to work with them and pleased to work with all the people here to make this a welcome home for Afghans.
Salam Aleichem, Shalom to all of you in the audience. We're so happy to be here and so honored. Sorry. I was feeling something all day today, and I couldn't name it, and then it came to me. It's gratitude. It's gratitude. And I just want to say, I was so interested in the concept of gratitude beyond being thankful that I looked up a TED Talk. And the TED Talk was by a professor of psychology at the University of California, Davis, who has been researching gratitude for many, many years. And he says that there's a power of gratitude, and for those of us who can feel gratitude, that we are enriched in three ways. One way is that we are healed by our gratitude. If we are feeling worried about our future and uninspired, that having gratitude can help us feel inspired for the future. The second positive effect of feeling gratitude is energy, feeling energized, and keeping going when we have to make hard decisions, or maybe we can't help all the people we want to help. The third is changing lives, and that is not only for ourselves, but also for the people that we touch. And I thought about that, and I just wanted to reach out to all of you and specifically tell you that I am feeling such gratitude tonight. And I would like to say that first of all, the Dialogue Institute, amazing gratitude for recognizing what we're doing along with so many other people. So we get to stand up here and accept the award on behalf of Austin Jews and Partners for Refugees. There are so many partners in the community of Austin that are working to do so much good work. And so I also want to recognize family. We talked a little bit about family, some of us at the beginning of the program. So Russ and I have 3 sons who attended tonight, so we feel really good about their presence. They're my first family, and we have more, but we'll just address the ones that were able to come who live here in Austin. So thank you. And my husband, who, believe it or not, before we retired, he was an electrical engineer, and I was an educator with learning disabled students. Now we're both retired, and we're working together, and we're actually enjoying it. So I feel a lot of gratitude about that to my family. Secondly, we have an amazing leadership team at AJVR. We call them our steering committee. We feel like they are helping us, all of us together, change lives. And I would like our steering committee, those of you that are here tonight, to please stand so we can give you our appreciation. Each other get through the tough times, and we celebrate the good times. And there are actually 12 of us on our steering committee, and so we couldn't do the work we do without each other. So I really want to say thank you and send you all my gratitude. And in addition, I want to talk about our family of refugee friends. We have really we've just really learned so much about another culture. We have really, besides feeling gratitude towards them, every day that we spend with them, we are amazed at their gratitude. Here they come traumatized, leaving family, leaving their homes, and all they do, often and repeatedly, is thank us. They have been so gracious, and it's taught me a lot about how when we really have nothing, how we can still have gratitude for the people in our lives. So I do want to say that, you know, they're always grateful, they're always looking toward the future, and they are always feeding us. Can't go into an Afghan home without eating and drinking with them. So it's been a really wonderful experience, and again, my gratitude, our gratitude to all of you for attending tonight, and thank you.
Congratulations, Austin Jews and Partners of Refugees. We are grateful for the work that all of you do on behalf of our local refugees. And I'd like now to invite up to the stage Imam Islam Mossad. He is the Imam of the North Austin Muslim Community Center. That's on North Lamar. As many of you all know, this is the largest mosque in Central Texas.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be to you. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Praises for Him, and peace and blessing be upon all of His prophets and messengers, from Adam to Noah to Abraham to Moses to Jesus and to their seal Muhammad. So I was asked to give the concluding prayer. So that's the good news. This is the concluding prayer. No, this was a great event. And like Dr. Puglisi said, I don't know how many of you realize we are blessed to have a rock star amongst us. This is a room full of luminaries, but very, very brief. Growing up here in Austin, Texas, one of the influences on my life was actually Dr. Ismail Faruqi's writing. So it was really good to see that touch that he pushed you to become the rock star that you now are. MashaAllah, as God has willed it. So I'll just say a few words. We're asking the one who has power over everything, as we say, Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir, which is He has the power to make anything happen beyond our projections, our statistics. In His hands is not only the whole world, but also between His fingers are each and every person's heart. So we ask Him, with all of His most blessed names, with all of His most beautiful names, we ask Him to extend His peace and blessings on His prophets and messengers. We ask Him, with all of His most beautiful names, to make this a gathering of rahmah, gathering of mercy. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما ولا تجعل فينا شقيا ولا محروما. We ask Allah, the one God, to make this a gathering full of mercy and light and serenity, and not to make any of us here deprived or miserable. We ask him to bless Dialogue Institute of Austin and the brothers and sisters and their spouses and their families who have been making this tireless effort to bring good to this city and good to this nation, and in fact, good to the world. We ask Allah, the one God, we ask him to bless their efforts, to make them continue to be a beacon of light and also warmth for all of those who are seeking and searching, and for those who only need sometimes that shoulder or that hug that our brothers and sisters are now providing for so many people in so many different difficulties in their life. We ask Allah, with all of his most beautiful names, to bless our teachers and our elders, and also to give Ismail Farouqi himself, give him the highest place in paradise. We ask Allah to bring the people of the world together, to bring them to see their commonality, even if it's around a soccer match. We ask him that they bring us to understand and see our common and shared hopes and dreams and aspirations. And in conclusion, Salamun qawlan min Rabbir Rahim, Salamun qawlan min Rabbir Rahim, Salamun qawlan min Rabbir Rahim. Peaceful words from the merciful Lord. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
That's a wrap. Thank you all for sharing your time and your treasure with us tonight, and thank you for supporting this vital mission that I think we need now more than ever. Congratulations on 20 years. We hope to see you here 20 more years and beyond and beyond and beyond, and we hope those peace islands continue to grow and multiply. Don't forget your gifts. There's a gift bag on the way out. If you made a bid on a silent auction item, check the table on your way out. Please be safe going home. Peace be with you. Good night.